We're never letting that guy do that again. I don't know who that guy is, but he's fired. Just kidding. Yeah, I wasn't even there. I don't know what the train. Oh, goodness. All right. Man, we're excited. You guys doing okay? Yeah? All right. We cut out this series trailer because we want to make sure we have the most time possible. 9 a.m. service asked some fantastic questions. So we just sent out the message there, and so if you signed up for that, you should be receiving a text message in the next minute or so if you haven't already, and then you'll just be able to reply to that with whatever questions you have. Whatever questions we don't get to, okay? Because people have asked, they're like, man, we know you're going to try to cover a lot. We're going to put it on the blog at brandedwithlove.com. Now, for you, you don't have to write this down. We want to make it easier. Download the Forefront Church app if you haven't already. You can access the blog there. Or on any of our social networking, you'll be able to see the questions when we answer them. We're going to answer them on Wednesday morning. And so anything we don't get to today, we're not going to leave you hanging. We want to make sure that we cover you and take care of all of the questions that you have because they're super important as we walk through this series. You guys have already asked a ton of great ones in the process. We want to make sure we frame the dialogue well today. As we look at this, as we deal with anxiety and depression, mental illness, mental disorders, and these things, we don't want to come at it from the wrong angle. We want to come from it from a spiritual angle and be able to look at the way that we can address this and help you and help one another, because all of us have walked through a piece of what we've talked about, and you've heard that in some of the messages. And so we want to start off with this particular definition of what mental health and mental illness is, and it'll be here on the screen for us this morning, hopefully. So there we go. All right, we're good. Mental health is not a character defect, a spiritual disorder, or an emotional dysfunction. Most of all, it's not a choice. We framed this out in the first week that nobody, when their feet hit the floor, do they go, man, really want depression today. It'd be super awesome. Nobody does that. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, you know what, things have been way too easy. I really wish that I would battle with schizophrenia. That would be super, and that would really help me in my life. No, these are things that because we live, God created a perfect world. We're the ones, as we sinned, that everything got fractured. And so all of the hurts, the pain, the suffering, and all these things are a result of a fractured world. And so as we battle through and look through some of these things, no one chooses this, but can God help in healing in these areas? We believe as walking through parts of this that it may not be perfect. You may not walk through and go, man, I totally beat depression, or I beat anxiety, or I beat this mental illness that I'm having. But we do believe that with the right steps, that it can be something you go, man, look at what God's doing. And we're going to approach everything today in a threefold way. And we believe these are the next steps that you have. The first one is God. That God would be the center and the bedrock, the foundation of the process. That everything that we would do, we would run in faith to a God that created us, molded us, and made us uniquely, that every one of us are unique. Some of you guys a little more unique than others, are that you walk through this, and then God made you unique, and we want to run to the one who knit us together. The second piece of this is that you would let others in. Now, we got a lot of questions last time. We already had some over the last few weeks. I'm sure you have more about what does it look like to let other people in. I'm scared, terrified, already been hurt by that, etc. The third piece of this is professional. That whether it be a counselor or a doctor, that you would leave the option open that maybe, just maybe, this isn't a lack of faith issue, that this isn't I don't have enough friends to comfort me issue, that possibly what you're wrestling and battling with is something that is beyond your control, that God has led certain people in, and maybe that's a professional, maybe that's medication. We'll talk about all these things. If you grew up anywhere in or around the 70s, you remember those triangle weirdo tables, and it had three legs? I'm not talking about the four-legged tables we normally see, but the three-legged tables, this is like that. If you take away one of those legs, things are going to go bad. And so you have to make sure that you have every piece of this involved. Dan looked a little weird. He was like, what's going on? You didn't say that first service.
I didn't see that table.
You didn't see that table?
I don't know about that table.
Maybe you had a
either.
different version of the 70s, Jack.
knows?
You know what I'm saying? So we won't get into that today. All right. And so, are you guys good? All right, and so you're already beginning to text in, and I'm seeing some of those. We're going to jump into the questions, add some extra ones as we go along, and we're going to do our best to cover as many as we can. Again, whatever we don't get to cover, we're going to put on the blog on Wednesday. Here we go. Question number 1, how can you know the difference between mental illness and just a struggle?
I would say to the person who submitted this, well done, because it means you're human that you're asking this question, and we really all share the same thing. We are a sort of a collection of our own experiences, and many things that we experience in life we have a response to. So sometimes we struggle with the fact that our kids are getting older, like when you put them on the bus for the first time. Moms and or dads will shed a tear to varying degrees. Oh, my baby's gone. Or when your child gets married, or perhaps when they leave the house, which may be a joyous occasion. I don't know. But anything like that, it means that you are human. You have emotions and you respond, and that's very healthy because that's the way we're created to experience things. But I think the essence of this question is, at what point does it become a problem, or at what point do we have to start addressing something more serious? So I kind of equate it like this. Let's say you're walking through the house and it's dark and you stub your toe. Now, outside of breaking your toe, you know that stubbing your toe hurts. And you might even, like me, you might actually utter something that may not be very nice when you do stub your toe. But even though it's a little minor injury, it's still an injury that you're dealing with. It may be very minor, and you know that you don't have to go to the ER for that. But let's say that you're walking around your backyard, and for whatever reason you're carrying a cinder block in your bare feet. Don't know why you would do that, but maybe you did, and you drop it on your foot. Well, now you've got a much more serious condition, and you're going to have to go seek professional help. So I think there's a big, wide swath of distance between those two things, and I think what this question is asking is, how do you know when you need to start doing something about it?
And so for me, when I'm trying to classify this and figure it out, Dan alluded to a moment ago, there are events that stir up emotions in us. When you give off your baby girl at her wedding, you're going to get, welled up. When you go through a fight with your spouse, you're going to feel a certain kind of way. When it's time to start considering mental health issues or going to see someone for help is when you notice a consistent pattern of these feelings, of these struggles, and you can't tie them to an occasion or a cause. So when you're having that fight, anger makes sense. But if you're sitting around walking around like I'm just bummed out in my mind all the time, everything in my life is good, I can't figure this out, and it's been consistent for a long period of time, for me, that's when I say let's get somebody involved in the process with you.
I mean, I even think you're going to be, there may be changes that are going on with you that you may not even notice, or you may start noticing, are you sleeping more? Are you more irritable? Usually the person closest to you is going to let you know if you're more irritable than normal, and they're going to let you know that. So it's important to start to look at what are some symptoms or things that are changing in you that are not what you normally exhibit.
I'm really glad my wife laughed when you said that.
Yeah.
They'll let you know when you're not acting normal.
I know she knows.
She should not be in eyesight while I do this. All right, number 2, I'm terrified to take medication. Why do you open the door to this possibility? And we had a question that came in last service that I wanted to add to this about what would be some of the steps if you have a child who is walking through this, the balance of counseling, God, medication, in a culture, if you're in any type of medical culture, this is not a slam, that has more so embraced as you jump into something, here are some pills. Now, are pills necessary sometimes? Yes, but how would you guys walk this medication realm?
I mean, I think I embrace medication because it works, and I will be full disclosure here. I take medication. I battle depression, and I take medication regularly for it. These guys have seen me when I haven't been doing that. And they're also thankful that I take it when I take it.
That'll preach.
But here's the thing. When you talk about medication is serious. It's not something to jump into lightly, and I understand reasons why you would fear or be hesitant to go into it. A lot of times we will have people prescribe us medication as if that's the one thing that's going to help. They'll give us maybe the impression, or maybe we'll bring the impression to the table that we're going to be concerned of being stuck to it the rest of our lives, dependent on it. Where really, medication works because your brain is a physical part of your body that regulates your emotions. The same way other parts of your body regulate other things and can be benefited from medicine when they're sick or hurt. But medication isn't the only thing. Medication helps, but one of the things I walk people through before we ever refer them over for medicine is, are you eating well? Are you exercising? Are you sleeping? What kind of habits do you have in your daily life? Because sometimes that is the stuff that is what's kind of knocking you off. And actually, one of the great things to check out if you're in here and particularly depression or anxiety is going on in your life, have your thyroid checked out. Your thyroid balances all kinds of hormones in your body. And I've had clients come to the practice who have been seeking treatment for anxiety and depression, who have been through counseling, medication, they can't get on balance. They got their thyroid checked out. There was an imbalance, they got it corrected, and the mood stuff just went away.
I think the question about kids is awesome too, because just so you know, in the study of psychiatry and psychology, the work or the study of children is relatively recent. Like modern psychology and psychiatry for adults isn't all that like super long either, but there's a whole lot more research with adults than there is with children, which sounds a little scary. But it means you have to be even more proactive, because what we know with children is that they're still developing, their brains are still developing, and it can be a real sort of, man, what do we do here? But I think you got to get with a really, really good primary care physician. And notice I didn't say psychologist, I said a primary care physician, because they're trained to know some about these issues and they can help refer you. But it's very important to partner with your primary care and then get a really, really good referral, if necessary, to somebody who deals specifically with child psychology and psychiatry, because it is different than dealing with an adult. But you have to be persistent. You have to know what you're going after, and you have to get the information to know that.
Yeah, I would say too, when it comes into, and we'll kind of address this a little bit later as well, making sure, like, if you land with someone and you're like, I'm just not sure if this is working, or I don't know the right question to ask, I don't know the right people. We have a lot of people who have emailed us, I don't know how to get my foot in the door to begin this process in a healthy way. You need to email one of us so we can help you with that. Because in a lot of instances, it's what you say in the front end that will help you for the long term in some of these ways. One of the things, and then we'll move on to the next one, when we talk about medication, we have a lot of people, even some of us on stage here, who have battled through addiction. I have an addictive personality, and I've battled through things in my life where had I not gotten help, they would have torn me up. And so you may be sitting here, man, I'm battling this thing, but I have an addictive personality. How do I do this? This is why talking to and working with a professional who is able to work is so important as you battle this and address this. And that's why we keep saying that it is a battle. It's not something that you and I handle on our own, and we'll get to that others piece here in a moment. Question 3, if you're always going to struggle with this thing, and this came in the week that I preached on the first week, because I said, cast it away and give it to God, but not just be in a passive, like, give it to God and don't do anything. Why is it not insanity to keep running back to God with it and not see change? A text came in, question similar was, how are you supposed to keep praying that God will take away your depression and change you, and it never seems to happen?
Man, it's a great question. Here's an attempt at an answer. If God were solely responsible for what has happened to you, then I can see why it would seem like insanity to keep going to him. So what we're sort of picturing here is God looking down and going, I'm going to give you something and make you miserable, which seems to go against everything that we read in the Bible. I can't tell me how many people that have walked through our doors that I've met who have said, man, I thought lightning was going to strike me when I walked through the door because I haven't been in church in forever.
The building was going to burn down.
That's right. And it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, kind of funny, but in a way it's a little bit heartbreaking because I think a lot of people have this idea that God is looking down, waiting for you to make a mistake or watching you struggle or whatever and going, that's what you get.
Yeah. There was this diagram we were talking about it, like if you did two columns, and column A has person A, and they battle heavily with depression. And column B, same symptoms, same everything, depression, but person in column B has said, I'm going to involve God with this. You could keep trying it on your own, and person A will keep doing that and working through that, and they'll just go, I just can't beat this, I just can't. There seems like there is no hope. Now, person B, I will promise you, because we are person B, that when you begin to surrender that peace to God, I still battle anxiety. I pray with my wife, and we talk. I'm like, I have to preach today. I have to preach today. Can we pray to God because I got to get up on stage? And she's like, yeah, let's pray. Like every Sunday, because you people are scary. It's so like I get up here and do it, but it's battling. But I ask God to intervene. I'm still battling that. I believe that I will still battle that to the day that I die. But I have hope, and I'm able to begin to overcome that. And I think that's what happens when you work through it. It's not insanity to surrender to God, even when things are hard, because it gives me a hope.
Yeah, the perspective is that we have an expectation that God is just going to snap fingers and fix everything. And sometimes he does that. All of us have seen times where people have been miraculously healed and cared for and that sort of thing. But the assumption of this question, or the way I'm taking it, so if it's your question, I'm getting it wrong, forgive me, is saying if God is supposed to fix me and heal me of these things, is it not insanity to keep running back when it's not happening? And I would challenge those of us in here who are wondering with this, myself included, in fact, I'm talking to myself more than any of you, is that when the temptation is to back off because God's not intervening the way I demand he comes in and fix it, to look back and say, what is God's role in my life? And it is to guide me, to comfort me, to give me strength, so that even if I have an affliction, that I'm not in it by myself. God has also provided people in our paths. We have friends, family members, counselors, doctors, pastors who care about us, that God has directed into our path. And so if we look at the situation and say, God is supposed to come down and take my depression, my anxiety, my affliction away from me, we're ignoring all the resources he's put in our path. And so we miss out in the bigger picture. And our perception is it's insane to go back to God because he's not doing anything. But really, we're missing out on what he's doing because we won't look beyond what we think it should look like.
That's really good, man, because sometimes you pray to God, God, help me with this, and God's like, I did. I sent John. And you're like, I don't really like John. John's my next door neighbor, but God sent you John. And so it's like, go deal with that with John. Like sometimes, or God, I want to be able to deal with this, but I don't like going to church services because I have anxiety. He's like, well, I gave you a really rad church. I'm a little biased. And so you should go and be a part of it. And so, man, you nailed that one, Chris. All right. Number 4, I've been to a counselor before and nothing seemed to help. Why keep trying? And this individual said, I've been to 5 different counselors and all 5 of them have eventually said to me, I don't know what to do. So, I'm going to toss that to the guys who have worked in the official counseling realm.
That's a hard one. Let me just start with sort of the counselor, going to see a counselor, what happens when you go see a counselor and it doesn't seem to help. First of all, when you go to a counselor, they are under a very strict code of ethics, which means if you go in there with something, if you were to come see me with something and I was not qualified to help you with that, I need to refer you. And actually, when I see people, I'm not trying to get out of work, but I will refer people a lot because I want to make sure they get the right person. And if you go in and talk to your doctor and your regular PCP and you tell them, hey, I've got this ache in my elbow, and so you expect an x-ray maybe, or you expect some sort of examination. There should be some sort of protocol to kind of figure out why your elbow hurts. It's no different with a counselor. And you have to go in and you have to Sometimes you have to be very persistent and say, this is what I'm feeling. And you have to answer their questions, and you have to ask questions. And a good therapist should provide you with a plan of how they're going to walk you through whatever it is you're bringing to them. The answer with the 5 counselors situation is, I would say you have to keep trying. You're talking about your physical and mental well-being. You've got to stay after it. You've got to keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative to not trying is to stay right where you are. And if you're not happy with right where you are, that's the reason to keep moving. And I'll speak from the counselor side of the table. Everything Dan said was right. We're supposed to walk with you, learn from you, about you, ask you questions, hear your point of view on things. But also, we just met you. You may have years, decades of stuff that you're trying to work through. We may not figure it out right away. We just met you, and we're working with what you brought to the table. We don't have like a spider sense that tells us like what's going on behind the scenes. We have to rely on the information you provide. And we know that, and that's why if you're seeing a good counselor, they're compassionate with you and will walk you through that. But we've had it plenty of times where someone comes in, and in the back of their head, they've already Googled and figured things out, but they don't share the information with us, so we don't reach the same conclusion.
Yeah, they've been on WebMD.
I also think too, like you have to want to get well and participate. Like if you have a back injury, you have surgery, and you go to a physical therapist. Physical therapist gives you a list of things to do, exercises to rehab you. Okay, if you don't do any of those, it's a little disingenuous to go back to the physical therapist and say, I'm not getting any better. You have to participate in your counseling. There are tons of things that counselors provide people that they have to do, the exercises, the strategies, and new behaviors. You have to engage in those before you start to see some improvement. And you have to realize it may take a long time.
It's the same thing with the spiritual side. People come in and they go to a 1-hour service and they go, man, that was great. And then they wonder why the next week that their life is in shambles. I'm like, you spent 35 years wrecking it. An hour isn't going to cure that. Like, it takes time and, renewing that and continuing to come back. And so that was the pastor. I just had to get that out there. So question 5, how do you battle against suicidal thoughts? Does God understand if I end it? And we got this one in. What does God say about depression and people that have tried to commit suicide? I would say first and foremost, my heart breaks for this because I have a special place. I've watched friends who have ended their own lives. I remember years ago sitting with a cup of bleach before I met my wife, wanting to end my own life. Now, like, I look and I have an amazing wife. We have 3 beautiful girls who we're thankful look like their mom, and part of an amazing church. And so you need to talk to someone. And what scared all 3 of us, not scared us, but set red flags, is this question sounds like you've sat and thought about this for some time, and you've made a plan. And I want you to understand that your life matters. Like we talked about before, you are made uniquely by a God who cared enough to create and knit you. There is so much more to offer within this life and this existence than to take that route. And in my own experience with it, as I walk through this, to begin to take the reins away from God and determine how my existence was going to end. I'm not God. And I don't want to wear his shoes. I can't be that guy. And does God, I read this, does God understand if I do? And reading this question, what, people who have tried, you need someone to walk this out with you. And we have a lot of people who are either military or first responders who go, if I say something about this, my career is in jeopardy. If I go to someone within my command, within my unit, I would say come and talk to one of us. We do not want you sitting in that silent prison thinking these things. knowing what we know now on the other side of a lot of situations about how beautiful it can be on the other side when you begin to talk about this and open up about this?
I think there's a baseline that we all share. All of us think about our lives, and we think about kind of like, why are we here? There's a fancy word for it called existentialism, where we just sort of think about, why am I here? What's my life about? And that is what most people think. But it's when it starts to morph a little bit into, why am I here? Why should I even be here? And then, when you start to withdraw and isolate, you need to understand that this is a battle. Once you go beyond the kind of like that tough question, or sort of that thought-provoking, why am I here, and you move into other areas, then it becomes dangerous. And you got to know that you're in a battle. And here's the other thing. You're in a spiritual battle. There's a real enemy out there that the Bible tells us will seek, kill, and destroy in any way he can. So why wouldn't that start by changing what we think about ourselves? And if that's where you're at, like, you've got to reach out to somebody and let them know.
I would say to do that today. Like, I know we got other stuff going on. We have a fall festival going on later today. I would miss everything with my kids enjoying that if it meant you breathing and living another day. Yeah. All right, we're gonna move on, I think. I want you to hear that. All right, question 6. My husband doesn't understand my anxiety. What can we do to make life easier? Most days don't end well. I want to help. I want help in not feeling this way all the time, but I'm scared to death of my family and friends. Can I just tell God and not tell them?
It's hard to share that stuff for sure, and it's hard to understand that stuff if you're not in it. I've had plenty of times that I've had to just go apologize to family members and friends because they didn't understand why I was acting the way I was acting, how I was treating them the way I was treating them. And I think, and again, I am probably making an assumption here, but to wrestle through this, it can be hard in a marriage, particularly if that marriage is struggling because of that or because of something else. I think the first step is really just to talk to somebody, whether it's a close friend, pastor, or counselor, so that you can get a little bit of a grounding and start to share that stuff. It's okay. You'll run into people who don't understand. Your spouse may never understand. But as a spouse, your job is to do your best to understand, to learn how to care for. And even if you can't put yourself in the shoes to where you can fully say, I get this, you do have that obligation to try. And then as you guys get better, you can communicate with each other about what that experience is like.
I want to actually jump into this one because I think it's important. I think all these questions are important. Is ensuring your own mental health and happiness of your children okay to give up a marriage over? Or despite the unhappiness, do we stay because the bond of marriage and all that? I would jump in. There are a lot of factors in this question that are unknown for me. Because I don't know who's asking this, and again, we want to make sure that these things are anonymous, and then if you want to come talk to a staff member or whatever, I hear this, and what this tells me is that there are a lot of things under the hood that were already happening before mental health was also introduced into this. That there are other things that are processing and taking place. Even in some of these questions, husband doesn't or spouse doesn't understand anxiety. I want to share it with them. There seems to be a fear. There's probably a fear there, and I'm going to make an assumption because something else is happening. Anytime you introduce another variable into the mix, all it does is illuminate all the other things that are going on. If you have a healthy marriage and you introduce a variable, what you're going to do? You're going to tackle that together. You're going to come around that. You're going to protect the kids. You're going to do whatever you need to do. If the marriage is unhealthy in whatever factor, let's just say communication, and then you introduce the variable of this mental health, your fear tells you, don't do that. If I do this, then everything's going to explode. Don't do that because they won't understand. Remember last time we talked. Remember last time we engaged one another. And so when I read this, talking about giving up a marriage and all this stuff over the mental health, I don't know, like I asked the question to me, like, is there abuse happening in the marriage that's taking place? Is there something happening to the kids that's going on in here? See, I don't know some of these factors. And so what I would say is that this is something where when we talk about God, others, professional, this is an others category where you would say, man, I'm going to invite someone in who's able to give me some discerning advice to help me walk this through, because I don't want to make something, because I'll tell you what does God ultimately want? The ideal, the perfect parameters is for families to stay together. Now, that being said, I don't want you to leave today and go, Jason said, no matter what's going on in my family, everybody stays together. That's not what I said. That's what God wants. But we live in a broken world where things aren't ideal and bad things happen. So it's walking through those things and trying to figure out what's the best for you, husband, family, and ultimately that honors God in the process. And that might mean that your marriage dissolves. I don't know, but we need to look at that. That's an individual case that I think needs more attention than just simply giving a canned answer. And I don't think that's fair to you to say canned answer.
Yeah, I think it's really, really complex. And I was in a home like that, and my mom took, she made her decisions at the time, so I know it's very, very difficult, which is why I think you have to get absolutely all the information you can. You need to get in and see somebody, because if that situation is correct, you've got somebody who is healthy and somebody who may not be healthy, then you have kids in the middle of it. And that is a very complex situation. Now, it talks about kids' happiness, which there's a lot of things we're going to do, and our kids aren't going to be happy, and that falls under the realm of tough. You're not always going to be happy.
We're going to answer that in the next question.
But however, you need to be alerted to the safety of your children. Like, I don't know the situation, so I may be assuming too much. But are they safe, and is the environment stable for them so you can address this more holistically or not? And if you don't know, you need to come and ask, because a lot of people get in situations they think are fine that are no, you need to stop that.
And I would add the idea of, man, this situation is just completely out of whack. We don't know what to do. So let's, divorce or split up. There's other things before that point. I've worked with couples where we have said, hey, separate. Like, you live over here for a little bit, you live over here for a little bit, but the idea is that we're going to heal, we're going to learn about what's been going on, and then eventually move back together as a family. And if you can have that mindset, that is a step of hope in between where things are okay and now they're just off the rails and we feel like we need to split up.
I want to talk about that happiness piece. How does that look? It's actually in this next question. And we compiled a bunch of questions and did like our top ones, and we're interjecting these in here. Question 7, I'm depressed all the time and I don't understand why I'm not happy. I'm trusting God and all the things you say on Sundays, but I'm never happy. Why? I want to add these two, and then I'm going to take this one a little bit. Struggling with depression and anxiety tears me away from God, and I feel like I've lost a connection with Him. How can I get that back? I feel I'm losing grip, kind of the next comment in there, of letting go, and like God's letting go of me. I want to kind of mold all these together. In that, like, when we battle anxiety and depression, I battled depression for years. I still battle with anxiety. I'm going to battle anxiety till the day that I die. I don't think that's because God's not good. I believe God is good, which is why I still get to overcome it each day, even though it's hard. But when we look at this question of happiness and dealing with this and feeling like it's losing hope, I think we get hung up on this happy mentality. We've bought into Pharrell, okay? And we've bought into, all of a sudden, this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I love living in America, but I don't want to buy into the American dream. I want to buy into God's dream for my life. And what God wants for me is not to be happy. God is not concerned about my happiness. God is concerned about me being whole. Let's look at this from a parenting standpoint. I want my kids to be discerning people who are well-mannered, who will be able to function in society, so people won't point and say, look at that next generation. Be like, not my kids. And so, like, I'm doing everything I can. And so there are days where my kids will look at me as like, you don't want me to be happy. well, I don't really care about your happiness. What I want to do is to tell you not to stick the fork in the outlet, because I know as much as you think that'll make you happy, one, I want to YouTube it, but two, like that's going to be difficult later on. And so I need to make sure that I ensure a scenario where you are becoming whole. And so there are things, and I don't believe God's about my happiness. Why? Because when I get hurt, God tells me to turn the other cheek and forgive them. What makes me happy would be to say, God, what I really want to do is go punch them in the face. Okay? I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but your fleshly, earthly desire that would make you like, that would make me happy. All right? That's not what God wants for you or I. He is more concerned about us being whole. So when we address these questions, I feel like I'm losing grip. I feel like God's letting go. I want to... These things in here, and I'm with you, the struggle with depression and anxiety, I feel like it rips me apart. And if I was concerned in this battle about being happy, I would feel like God is losing grip and I would fall short. But I know that God's more concerned about me being whole. And there are going to be moments of joy even in the hard times. And so when my wife lost her mom and our family had this umbrella of hurt over it, we still had joy within the context of raising our daughter. When we lost our firstborn daughter, when we lost and did that, we wrestled with all of that, and I shook my fist at God and all these things, but I still had a joy knowing that I still had breath in my lungs. They had a wife who understood me, and we walked through it. And so when we process these, God is not letting go of us, and God is not aiming for you to be happy. God wants you to be whole, and that sometimes happens in the hardest of circumstances. When have you grown? Not when everything was awesome. You grow when things are difficult because there is a rub. That's why when you work out and things are difficult and your muscles are angry because they've been torn, when they heal, they are better. And it's the same way spiritually as we walk through these battles that God's saying, you're moving through this, you're dealing with it. I want to tear it a little more. I know it hurts, but when it comes back together, when you trust me, when we trust the creator of the universe, when we trust him, the one who made us anyway, then we begin to see these changes, and it no longer becomes about my happiness or your happiness. It no longer comes this battle of, look, God's letting go of me. I'm going, I know God's not letting go of me. God's making me whole, and I'm going to hold on to him in every facet of that.
You know, Paul wrote a large portion of the New Testament, and you could hardly find a part of it. You could pull a snippet out and see his struggle, and he talked a lot about his struggle and the struggle that we face. But he says in Philippians chapter 4, he talks about this word called contentment, which in a society where everything is overdone, if you were to run out in the street and go, I'm content, people would be like,
people be yelling
really?
from the windows, shut up.
Shouldn't you be aiming for something higher than that? Yeah. But what he's saying is he's content because, like I said last week, God forms his identity, and he trusts God. And when you get that framework, like I said last week, it sort of clears away so you can start to see a way forward. So like Jason said, okay, happiness, all right, but really what it's about is your contentment and a loving God that you can trust to help start to give you a pathway to move forward in some of these problems.
And I would say this from a personal standpoint, this was my Friday. Like I posted a picture of, went to the ocean front at First Street Jetty, and I posted this picture, everybody's like liking it and stuff like that. I was at the beach because I texted my wife, I'm like, I woke up today, I didn't want to get the kids ready, I didn't want to do anything. She leaves and goes to school to teach, and then I get the kids ready and all that stuff. And so I'm like, I don't want to do any of this stuff, I'm feeling super depressed, I don't want to get out of bed, I just want to watch Matlock all day, blah, blah, blah. And so she's like, okay, I understand, whatever. And I'm like, and I went to the beach, and I just had to clear my head. Everybody's liking it, whatever. And there are moments where you just kind of go, man, today's going to be a tough day. You don't have to put on game face. You still got to do what you got to do, but go like, man, today's tough. That's not my everyday. That's very rarely these days, but I have those moments. And so when we look at this, if God was about my happiness, I would never wake up on a day and go, I don't want to do anything. My kids are beautiful. I love them. I should want to do that. I woke up in the morning, I'm like, I don't know. Just go back to bed, kids. But that's because God's not about my happiness. God is about making me whole, and he's and God, how do you make me whole? And he could have sent it down miraculously, but no, he sent my wife instead. So I could have ignored my wife. I go, no, I'm going to listen to my wife because usually she's more right than I am. And so you go in these moments, you go, man, I'm going to trust God, and God's not about my happiness. Question 8. I saw a bunch of spouses kissing their spouses. Good for you. All right. Everybody's like, thank you, baby. How do you deal with personal relationships that don't help you or hold you back? And a follow-up to that, how do you trust and let someone in when everyone else has abandoned you? I want to, before we answer this, all of you who have kids, we're going a little over today. When you go back, you hug, high five, fist bump, whatever, because they had to deal with your kids. And I know your kid is an angel. And so I just want to preface that. Let's jump into this question. We're going to go over today.
I think it's okay to cut bad relationships out of your life. It's a little harder to talk about it that clearly when you're talking about families and spouses, so I'm not going to tackle that part. But I will tell you, there was a time when I was in college and I had a struggle that I was going through, somewhat of an addictive thing I was dealing with, and I wanted to stop. It was a sinful thing. I didn't want anything to do with it. I had a friend of mine who was like, hey, I do that too. I'm into that. I'd like to stop. Let's help each other out with that. Well, the context of this relationship ended up going to where he was actually providing more opportunities for us to get into trouble. And I had to look him in the face, and he's my friend, and say, hey, man, I'm serious. I don't want this problem in my life. You're not helping me. We can't hang out anymore. I hope that you do your best. I hope that you get where you need to be, but I can't hang out with you anymore because this is where I'm trying to go, and you're blocking that. And I think that's okay, especially when you talk about friendships, when you talk about people at work, people around your neighborhood, your community. You don't have to be rude or mean, but you have to own where you want to go, and you have to get people out of the way.
Before we wrap up, I want to say this. We're also going to post both sessions of this. So we're going to post the 9 a.m. and the 11 a.m. because there were different ways questions were asked. We answered them differently. I debated answering the end of this question this way. How do you trust and let someone in when everyone else has abandoned you? I want to kind of maybe put the elephant in the room. Maybe there is a chance that not all of those people abandon you because they didn't want to help. Maybe there is a chance, and I know this out of my own life, that the way that you're processing all of this, that you're shoving everyone away. There is a chance of that. We didn't answer it this way in the first service, and I was a little fearful too, but maybe that's the reality. And I want you to say and ask yourself, are my actions pushing everyone away? Because I don't know that that's always the case, but there could be, and we've encountered that sometimes, where someone goes, everyone hates me, nobody likes me, or whatever, and I kind of will stop and go, time out. Am I allowed to say the way you said it and how you said it and reenact it? And then they go, I don't know if I would want to hang out with me either. Let's undo that. Let's pull that back a little bit and unpack that. It's so, I wasn't sure about going there. I didn't do it first service, but I was like, let's do it this time. I want to end with this thought, and then we're going to take communion together and celebrate today. I have this passage. This has helped me through. This has been my staple. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. So, this is Paul kind of sharing his own experience. The guy who God said, hey, who will be the best poster child for sharing my good news? Yeah, the guy that killed Christians. He sounds great. And so, like, God, you're amazing. He said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in our weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ, Jesus' power, may rest on me. That is why, for Jesus' sake, I delight in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and difficulties. And this is the part that I cling to. For when I am weak, then I am strong, and he is strong for me. When I am weak, he is strong. And whatever you're battling, whatever you're wrestling, and I thank you for your questions today. And we're going to get to all of them this week, whatever's left. You're not alone. this place, God, this church family, you're not alone. We are so thankful that you're a part of God's church here. Why don't you pray with me?